How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. It's Eric Erickson here. I am delighted to have you. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, happy to have you. Let's be quite honest. I was absolutely, when I was a kid, the ultimate nerd. My buddy David Cannon did the photography for The Gathering several weeks ago in Atlanta, and my dad was there. My dad thoroughly enjoyed it. People were coming up to him asking him to sign the book that I had written. In fact, my dad showed up at the hotel, and they put him in my suite. And I had to evict my father from the fancy suite the hotel put me in. We have the same name. They were a little bit confused. But David says he went to my dad and told my dad he wanted to find out bad stories about me. And my dad was bragging about what a smart kid I was and how much my family learned from me when I was a kid. And David interrupted my father and said, in David's words, quote, "Cut the crap, Mr. Erickson. I want the bad stuff." My father gave away no secrets. I was a nerd when I was a kid. So, growing up overseas, I wanted to go to Washington, D.C. as a kid. And it was too far away. I mean, it was halfway around the world from where we lived. But I memorized the entire I memorized the subway system, the metro system, the roads, where everything was, to convince my parents I could get us there and be fine. Finally, when I was 18 years old, my brother-in-law was in the Navy. It lived in Norfolk, Virginia, and he and my sister took me up there. And I was their tour guide, showed them everything. Back then, before 9/11, you could walk around the Capitol without a pass, and I knew where Abraham Lincoln's catafalque was and where the crypt was, where they wanted to bury Washington and all that, and took them around. I love to explore cities. When I was a kid one time, I was in a plane crash as an 11-year-old by myself, and my parents after that were like, you can kind of go wherever you want to go. And I was a feral child. My sisters and I joke. When I was 12 years old, I explored London by myself at night, sneaked out of a hotel, and got on the London Underground system. And my dad at one point joked that my mother must have had an affair with a homing pigeon because I have a sense of directions. I was that nerdy kid. And yes, being the nerdy kid, I had a proverbial Dexter's Laboratory. I regale my children on this. I had, like in Dubai as a kid, there were no safety protocols if you wanted to buy chemicals. And you would save up your money doing your lawn care and babysitting tasks, and you would buy video games, perhaps, maybe a video game console. No. Eric Erickson as a kid would save his money and buy liters of sulfuric acid and zinc and test tubes and Bunsen burners, and I would fill up balloons with hydrogen for my birthday and allow my friends to set fire to them and watch the Hindenburg explode. I loved science as a kid. And one of my favorite party tricks was to take copper wire and wrap it very tightly around the galvanized steel nail, and then take a magnet, a U magnet, and pass it back and forth rapidly as someone held both ends of that copper, and watch their hair stand on end and them scream as the electricity came through. As I've said on this program before, it is wild to me that all of our states of power generation, by and large, with the exception of wind and solar, are dependent on generating heat to create steam, to spin turbines, to pass magnets over copper coils. Our energy system depends on magnets moving rapidly over copper coils in order to generate power. And the left these days wants us to get rid of fossil fuels, including coal and oil and other things, and do greater electrification of our systems. One of my favorite chemicals to use as a kid, and it came in all the chemistry sets, I think it still does, is copper sulfate, which is a blue crystal. And you can do chromatography with it. You can cause it to set on fire and it burns green. In fact, copper sulfate is, if you get Roman candles or other fireworks and it burns green, a lot of times it's got copper sulfate in it. The copper burns green. Copper is necessary for the electrification of planet Earth. Here's a problem. We don't have enough of it. Wired, not exactly a progressive or not exactly a conservative publication, it's very progressive, has a story on the green economy and the need for copper. And essentially, it boils down to this. The battle cry of energy transition advocates is electrify everything, meaning let's power cars, heating systems, industrial plants, and every other type of machine with electricity rather than fossil fuels. The irony here is that much of our electricity is actually produced by fossil fuels, natural gas and coal. We think about the petroleum that goes into making the gas for our cars that generates the power, but actually it's way more complicated than that, but the left doesn't seem to care. To electrify everything, we need copper and lots of it, second to silver, a rarer and far more expensive metal. Copper is the best natural electrical conductor on Earth. We need it for solar panels, we need it for wind turbines, and we need it for electric vehicles. A typical electric vehicle contains as much as 175 pounds of copper. We need it for the giant batteries that will provide power when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. We need it to massively expand and upgrade the countless miles of power cables that undergird the electric grid in practically every country. In the United States, the capacity of the electric grid will have to grow as much as threefold to meet the expected demand. A recent report from S&P Global predicts the amount of copper we'll need over the next 25 years will add up to more than the human race has consumed in its entire history. The world has never produced anywhere close to this much copper in such a short time frame, the report notes. The world might not be up to the challenge. Analysts predict supplies will fall short by millions of tons in the coming years. No wonder Goldman Sachs has declared no decarbonization without copper and called copper the new oil. As the energy transition gathers speed, the value of copper has soared. In the past 4 years, the price of a ton of copper has shot from around $6,400 to more than $9,000 a ton. That, in turn, has made electrical wiring, equipment, and even raw metal fresh from the mines into juicy targets for thieves. All around the world, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of the metal have been stolen, and countless lives lost. With the possible exception of gold, no other metal has caused so much death and destruction. And of course, there's a sidebar here. And that is China. A lot of the copper mines in the world are outside the United States, many of them in South America and Central Africa, though some in the Western United States. The very same environmentalists who demand the electrification of everything are the environmentalists who refuse to withdraw environmental regulations that make it too expensive to mine copper in the United States, which puts us further in debt to third world countries, many of which have deals with China. It's becoming increasingly clear, as you and I have known, and now increasingly clear to people who aren't conservative talk radio listeners, that so much of the greening of the world makes us more dependent on a communist regime that kills its dissidents and enriches rogue third world regimes that are fine to do a deal with China. The greening of the economy is also something that's not going to happen. I realize it's Exxon, and people are skeptical of Exxon. People are skeptical because it's a petroleum company, and obviously they have a dog in the fight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem here is that Exxon actually knows its stuff. And Exxon says that global oil demand is going to be virtually unchanged by 2050 and warned that any move to curtail investment in fossil fuels would trigger a new energy price shock. In a forecast released yesterday, the U.S. super major said oil demand would stay above 100 million barrels a day over the next 25 years. A forecast that assumes an energy transition will fail to curb the world's thirst for fossil fuels. Exxon warned of a new global oil shock if companies fail to keep investing to match the demand, saying crude prices could quadruple as supply fell. Now, BP says they expect a decline to 75 million barrels per day in 2050. Willing to bet Exxon is right because BP has to placate its green overlords in a way that Exxon doesn't. And here's the thing. Where do you need fossil fuels for tires? You need fossil fuels for plastics. You need fossil fuels for clothing materials. We're not getting rid of fossil fuels. It's a pipe dream of the left, designed to tie us back to China even more. I've said it before, it's worth reminding people that back in the 1980s, after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1990-91, we were allowed to go into the Soviet archives and the KGB. And it turns out that in the 1980s, a lot of the anti-nuclear activists and pro-environment activists in the United States were being funded by the Soviet Union on the sly through third-party groups. The environmentalists trying to regulate out of existence uranium mines and things like that were actually funded by the Soviets as a backdoor way to shut us down. I would not be surprised to learn that through backdoors unbeknownst to many of the environmentalist groups, maybe beknownst to the environmentalist groups, they're being funded by China, because it's remarkable how every major policy advance for the environment in this country makes us more dependent on China. Back to the Wired magazine article. The new frontier for copper is Central Africa. Investment has been pouring in since the early 2000s in answer to the howling demand for raw materials from China. Most of the action is the Democratic Republic of Congo, a vast nation 2/3 the size of Western Europe that's rich with copper as well as diamonds, gold, cobalt, and other minerals. Mining supplies around 80% of the country's foreign earnings. Little of that filters down to its people, however. Most Congolese subsist on less than $3 a day. And guess where China has been making major investments in the purchase of mining rights? There's the Kamoa-Kakula mine, a joint venture with a Chinese company, one of many that are heavily involved throughout the Democratic Republic of Congo's mining industry. China refines and consumes more copper than any other country and relies on foreign suppliers. So when the Congolese began opening up to foreign investment, China pounced. Chinese companies have since supplied billions of dollars in infrastructure support to the Democratic Republic of Congo in exchange for far-ranging mining rights. In fact, China disproportionately owns copper rights in the world, and to the extent the United States has vast copper reserves, environmentalists in this country, probably funded by China, are shutting down our ability to mine it efficiently and cheaply, driving up our costs. The Green New Deal advanced by the Democrats is basically serfdom for us to China. And as the left advances its electrification demands that we actually can't meet as a nation, all it does is make us more and more dependent on China. It's becoming, the Green New Deal, a national security threat to the United States.
Blinds.com's Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Greetings, conversationalists. It is Eric Erickson across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Let me go to Dave's phone call here. Welcome to the show, Dave. How are you?
Hey, Eric. Your frustration you expressed last top of the hour. Wow, great job articulating your words. But, I voted for Trump twice, and he wasn't my first choice this time. But it's like I try to tell my son, you're voting for you're voting for the conservative movement, not the man so much. And I was listening to Sean Hannity the other night. And I was really concerned about his explanation of the unrealized capital gains. That scares me to death. And
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, I agree with you that the policies matter. And I think that for people who are reluctant to vote for Donald Trump, I get it. And to the extent people say I can't vote for him, I do hope they don't vote for Harris and let your refusal to vote for either side be a signal to the parties that they need to do better. But for those who are willing to vote for Trump, I mean, undoubtedly the policies that we get out of a Trump administration, even though I will disagree with many of them, they're still going to be better than any of the policies we get from the Harris administration. Don't forget, it's not just the presidency. It's the bureaucracy. It's the regulations or the deregulations. When Trump was president before, he ordered that for every new regulation passed, he had to get rid of 2 regulations and curtail the Code of Federal Regulations. Getting rid of regulations stimulates the economy because it reduces the burden on businesses for compliance costs. It was a pro-growth strategy, and it's one that by executive order Donald Trump would bring back to the presidency. It is one that Joe Biden explicitly got rid of when he became president. It's common sense. So we would get that back. We would get good judges that we would not get from Kamala Harris. Whether you're upset with Donald Trump for saying he would veto national abortion legislation or not, the reality is it's never going to pass Congress. But you know what? He could get rid of the trans regulations for the Department of Education. He could pardon the people who've gone to jail for praying at abortion clinics and order his attorney general not to arrest other people for having done so. There are things Donald Trump would do if he were president far better than a single thing Kamala Harris would do as president. And so, yeah, I mean, push comes to shove. I can rationalize a vote for Trump in a way no one could for Harris. Now, I want you to rationalize going to Vision Computers because of this. They can build you a great computer and save you money and give you their free award-winning tech support with it. But if you have a computer already and need world-class 5-star tech service, Vision Computers can do it for you for just $179 a computer a year, not a month. With Vision Computers, you'll get a special number you can call and in 15 seconds or less get the answer to any question you have. They can even remote into your computer to fix things. They can do email support, printer support. They can do this for your business. They can do this for your home. All you have to do is call them at 404-COMPUTE. See how quick they answer the phone when you call them at 404-COMPUTE. Or go to visioncomputers.com. Sign up with Vision Computers for their world-class tech support. Your employees should not have to be geniuses at their computers, just geniuses at their jobs. Vision can be the geniuses for their computers, so they're productive on their jobs. Vision's productive on the computers. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. Let Vision Computers take your tech support solutions on them. 404-COMPUTE. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America, and I am delighted to have you with me. The phone number, if you'd like to be on the program, is 877-973-7425. I want to talk to you a little bit about Arizona. We had a caller, couldn't get to him, he hung up, but I want to answer his question anyway. Kari Lake, I got excited about her in 2022. I was not originally a fan of Kari Lake in 2022. I thought, oh Lord, this woman's going to be a clown show. And she turned out to actually be a pretty polished candidate who barely lost the governorship, but in the final days of the campaign, revealed the clown-like nature of her candidacy that she has maintained ever since. Some of you like Kari Lake, and this is one of the things that I've learned. I'm going to leave names out of it. There is a conservative. He was a presidential candidate. He was a member of Congress. I don't want to be too descriptive. I don't want to pick fights, but let's just say friends of mine who are social conservatives have long loved a particular Republican on the national stage who the social conservatives just love the guy. And I did too. Until I met him and got to know him behind the scenes and paid attention to him behind the scenes. And one of the things that I learned is that he's actually a horrible human being. He treats people when the cameras aren't on like garbage, and just was not a nice person to be around. Just wasn't nice. Wasn't pleasant. And it's the way that you see people when they're not. So, for example, y'all know my views on Donald Trump, and if you've listened to this program just this afternoon, you get my feelings. But the one thing that has stood out to me about Donald Trump over time is I interviewed him one time years ago, and I went into the Trump Tower. He didn't know me, didn't know what I looked like. And he was just there talking to the staff in the lobby, just schmoozing with the staff. Didn't have to be. They were black janitorial service workers and him. And he was having a good time with them. They enjoyed his company. He enjoyed their company. And I will always have that memory of Donald Trump, though I don't care for him and have seen other sides of him and things like that. Behind the scenes, Donald Trump was nice to these people who he didn't have to be nice to. Contrast that with this other particular person who, when the cameras wasn't off and no one was looking, was aloof and rude. Kari Lake struck me as someone who was a good candidate. She turned the media on its head. She was able to pivot. She was able to, as a former reporter, use her skills against the media, and she barely lost. But in her final days of the campaign, she kind of let the mask slip. And she said something on the campaign trail that she's never been able to get past, and that was going full MAGA several days before the election, told John McCain voters she didn't need him and she didn't want him. It happened live on stage. And the McCain voters in Arizona, who were the dominant force of the Republican Party of Arizona, said, well, you know what? We don't need you or want you either. And Kari Lake has never been able to rebuild that bridge, because every time she attempts to, she does stupid things and she comes across as inauthentic. She comes across as trying too hard to be MAGA, not her own person. She comes across as one of those people who's sending me hate mail right now, who feels the need to ride Donald Trump's leg and cast aspersions on anyone who doesn't. She wants to be the person to bow the lowest in the room and expects everyone else to, so no one can point and snicker at her saying this is embarrassing. Nope, she wants to bully anyone else who's insufficiently loyal. I got no use for that. No use for that at all. The reality is Kari Lake played her hand badly in 2022 and has done nothing to right the wrongs and fix her problems. Not only that, the Arizona Republican Party voters have decided in a staggeringly cruel act of suicide to destroy the Arizona Republican Party. Now, they've got a new chair of the Arizona Republican Party who I'm led to believe is a competent person who cares about rebuilding the party. But when your base voters are turning out and pushing conspiracy theories and backing someone like Kari Lake, they had a sheriff. They had a competent sheriff who ran a campaign, but the Trump world went in for Kari Lake. Kari Lake doubled down. She had the money and the name recognition, and she had the tours of Fox and Newsmax and OAN, and she was able to trounce the guy in the primary. You know the result? Here's the result today. The Arizona Police Association, the leader of which spoke at a Donald Trump rally just a couple of weeks ago, have endorsed the liberal Democrat Ruben Gallego in Arizona in the Senate race, despite his controversial history on law enforcement. Here's their statement. Congressman Gallego has continually fought for robust, increased funding for America's law enforcement community and specifically Arizona law enforcement. Gallego helped secure $168 billion in direct support of police officers so that they have the personnel and equipment needed. They backed Kari Lake 2 years ago. The president, Justin Harris, said, as a Marine combat veteran, we know Congressman Gallego understands the complexities of modern policing in American society. I'm proud to have their support, Gallego says. Now, keep in mind that Justin Harris, he's a Trump supporter. He spoke on behalf of Donald Trump. The polling out of Arizona has Donald Trump winning Arizona, and it has Kari Lake losing. Oftentimes we look at politicians on the national stage, they get on national television, they get national exposure, and we think, my goodness gracious, this person's sharp. But we don't pay attention in their states to the terrible campaign they're running. We are fed a PR line on television, and we don't have the reality on the ground to compare it to. And the reality on the ground is that Kari Lake burned a lot of bridges with a lot of people whose votes she needs, and has been too arrogant to try to authentically patch those relationships. Contrast the Arizona Republican voters with the Michigan Republican voters. Michigan is another poop show for the GOP. But Michigan tossed their chairman, who was a wackadoo, and the Michigan Republican voters rallied to Mike Turner, who is not my favorite pick to be in the Senate. But Donald Trump, who refused to put distance between himself and Kari Lake because their friendship, has surrendered Arizona. But we might be able to pick up Michigan because we have actually a credible Republican pick in Michigan. He's one that's not super conservative, and a lot of my conservative friends don't like, but he's a good fit for Michigan because the Michigan Republicans decided they didn't want to address past grievances. They wanted to actually win. It's part of the problem in Georgia. In 2022 in Georgia, every single Trump candidate went down in flames in the general election other than Burt Jones, the lieutenant governor, who was seen as his own man anyway. He could define himself. He had the money to do it. He was definitely a supporter of Donald Trump's, but also had his own positions. It wasn't in Donald Trump's shadow. Herschel Walker got into a runoff thanks to Brian Kemp's ground game, getting everybody across the finish line, and then Walker went down in flames without Kemp's ground game there to be able to support him. Brad Raffensperger won re-election despite being hated by the Trump supporters. Brad Raffensperger made it out of the Republican primary because though the Republican Party at the time wanted to relitigate past grievances, as some still do, the majority of Republican voters decided they wanted to win. In Arizona, those Republican voters have decided they would rather negotiate past grievances than actually put aside differences and win. In Georgia, by the way, where I am, still has problems. Some of the most vocal MAGA activists in the Republican Party of Georgia want the Republican popular governor of the state arrested, claiming that he's helping Democrats steal the election. It's bizarre. You've actually got a member of the Republican Party in Georgia who's a flat earther, had another member of the Republican Party who claimed the election was stolen and there was all sorts of fraud, and turns out he himself had voted illegally and had to be taught. We refused to get out of the party. They had to force him out. Clown show. Republicans, do you want to win or not? The amount of hardcore supporters of the president who insist we have to relitigate 2022 in order to win is actually contrary to the fact that the people who have been winning since 2022 have moved on from it. Brian Kemp did very well in his election in 2022. Despite Trump being against him, Trump has now patched things up with him, thank goodness. We can get past this. But the candidates who are willing to move forward were the ones who won. The candidates who wanted to dwell on the past are the ones who lost. And there's a lesson there for Donald Trump as well. If you want to win in 2024, and winning is possible, and this is still Donald Trump's race to lose, he's still ahead of the swing states. You got to focus on the future, not the past. No one has ever won an election based on what they've done. People win elections based on what they're going to do. It's one of the problems for Joe Biden, frankly. It was one of the problems Democratic strategists told Joe Biden repeatedly, is stop talking about the past. You saved America from Donald Trump and et cetera, et cetera. Focus on the future. What's your agenda? And Joe Biden never could come up with one, and ultimately they pushed him aside for a lot of reasons, including his mental incapacity. But there was a deep frustration among Democrats that he was ground to the past. Carrie Lake in Arizona still wants to relitigate a supposedly stolen election in Arizona in 2022 and grievances with McCain supporters. She's not really running for the future. She's running about the past. And she's losing to a guy who is running about the future, a far left progressive who should not be in the Senate, and yet he's winning because Carrie Lake burned a bunch of bridges and even now can't stay on a positive message for the future. Donald Trump, stay on a positive message for the future. Talk about the future. Talk about what you can bring America back to. You know, for Donald Trump's future, the message is actually look at my administration and economy versus Joe Biden's. You want my sort of economic track record in the future or Joe Biden's? There's a way to tie it all together, but relitigating grievances over the past election and et cetera, it's not a way to actually win a campaign. It's not hard in this environment for a Republican to win, and yet they may throw it all away by dwelling on the past and the grievances and the anger and the rage and being more interested in being nasty to people who might support them as opposed to trying to persuade people to support them. I can't emphasize this enough to the number of you who feel compelled to send me hate mail because you don't like what I said in the last hour. If you need to make sure I know that you hate my guts, don't like me, wish I would think otherwise, want me off the air, want to cancel my sponsors or have me throw off the radio, that's perfectly fine. But while you're banging away at your keyboard to me, or you're in your boat parade with your Trump flag, or your car parade with your Trump flag, the Democrats are out knocking on doors of independent voters they need. The Democrats, while you're in your boat flotilla, are knocking on doors in the very same neighborhood of general-only voters who don't vote in primaries, trying to identify what issue will persuade them to vote for Kamala Harris. While you're calling my advertisers, demanding they cancel me, the Democrats are out calling voters, persuading them that Kamala Harris would be better for the country than Donald Trump. Priorities matter. And Republicans keep losing because they keep nursing grievances and rage while the Democrats are making persuasive cases. You may not like the Democrats. Don't want Kamala Harris to be president. I think she'd be bad. But the Democrats are focused on winning. The Republicans are focused on relitigating the past. And focused on winning now is going to win you an election when focused on relitigating the past shows it's not going to happen. In Wisconsin, every Republican in the Republican primary, just about, not all, but almost all of the Republicans in the Republican primaries just a few weeks ago who argued about election integrity in 2022 lost. The Republican voters there in the primaries had enough. They're ready to move on. Now Republican odds, incidentally, in Wisconsin have gone up in winning state legislative seats as a result. If you want to nurse grievances about the past, that's fine. But that's a recipe for disaster, and every election since 2020 has pointed in that direction. The choice is yours. That's why Arizona Republicans are probably going to lose their Senate seat to Ruben Gallego, a progressive Democrat, because they decided to fight the past instead of fight the future. That matters. All right. Enough about that. I can move on. I need to tell you, with bank rates the way they are right now, with interest rates maybe coming down, but we're not 100% sure. With all the economic turmoil out there, Swiss America actually has the ability to help you protect your hard-earned assets. They've got a report, The Secret War on Cash. You can get it for free. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They can educate you on protecting your assets. Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years. The report takes less than 15 minutes to read, can save your retirement and finances. What you do is to get your free report is call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency. The government is tracking you. Let Swiss America explain what they're doing. Just mention my name, Eric, when you call or text 800-289-2646. 800-289-2646. You can also go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, SwissAmerica.com/ERICK, or text ERICK to 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. All right, let me close this out here with MJ calling. MJ, welcome to the Eric Erickson Show. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. What's going on?
Hey, one thing is I really appreciate what you said earlier today about your feelings on Trump, and I feel the same way. I wanted to see if you could address kind of a theory or something that I've heard floated out there that it's okay to vote, for Kamala Harris and then vote Republican all the way down ticket because of a lack of a desire to support someone like Donald Trump. As a black conservative, I know your view is that we would just leave that blank rather than doing that, but I feel obligated to vote. The amount of bloodshed and work that people have gone into giving me the right to vote, it just doesn't feel right not to vote at all. So could you kind of address what it looks like to vote that way?
I would say this. In fact, I got hate mail from Larry, who clearly missed the point that I'm trying to tell people not to vote. That's not it at all. I would prefer people vote for Trump to stop Harris. But if you cannot bring yourself to pull the trigger for Donald Trump, it is a vote to leave that blank. It's a choice to leave that blank. I'd rather you leave it blank than vote for Harris. I don't want to give her any sort of advantage. There is a class of people out there, and I understand what you're saying, MJ, that cannot bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump. Don't vote for Kamala Harris, who doesn't share your values. Just because if you're in the black community, you say, well, she shares my skin color. That's not enough reason to vote for her when she's going to destroy everything you believe in, particularly if you want to vote Republican down ballot. It'd be better just to sit it out and say, my vote is going to be to signal my disgust with both candidates, and maybe in 4 years, the parties will get a clue. I'd prefer you cast a vote for Trump. I'm willing to hold my nose and do it too. Y'all know my views on him, but I'm willing to do it. Why? Because I think controlling the regulatory state and the bureaucracy and picking judges matters greatly, and I would rather him do that than Harris. That being said, if you just fundamentally, it disgusts you to do that, it's a vote to leave the line blank. I wouldn't vote for someone who you disdain on their values and the policies they'd implement like Harris. Leave it blank. And that's a clue to both parties that they got to do better in the future to get your vote. Maybe they'll figure that out. Maybe. Don't hold your breath, though, sadly.